Well, guys, decided to sit out here for a little bit and smoke a cigar and have some coffee. Ah, and today we're gonna burn a Gloria Cubana. This one has a little bit of a I don't know. I can't make it out. Let's see when it burns and see what if it changes the. It has good flavor. That's better. Now, I took this one apart, thinking that it had a flint, and it doesn't have a flint. It's an electronic flint. I'm figuring, and if I said, okay, if it's an electronic flint, it has to have a little watch battery. No, I took the side off on both sides. I took the cap off here. There's nothing there. The bottom is what adjusts the flame, and it has the little spigot there that you can inject the fuel. And then the top does not have anything, but there's no spark. It's 1/3 fuel, so I'm using it up with the other one. I light up with the other one so I can just chuck it when it's done. So I don't understand what kind of spark system it has. No battery, no flint. Well, it's coming around. It's not there yet. So I'm a rookie historian. I always liked history, and now with these documentaries that these professional video makers are doing, there's a guy that he does all the World War II battles and the armaments and the machine guns and even the trucks and the actual army, the soldiers, the gear, the helmets and everything. The Germans had the best stuff. The Germans had the best stuff as far as the army. They didn't have the biggest navy. The biggest navy was England. England had 1,400 ships. Over 380 were warships, because you need the troop carriers and the fuel ships, and the supply ships. So but fighting ships, the destroyers, the battleships, the all the heavy duty stuff. The English had more than I'm not saying that it was better, but they had more than the Germans. The Germans had the big, what they call it, pocket ships, pocket cruisers. The Bismarck is very famous. I saw that movie when I was a kid. Oh, that's a lot better now. And this guy, he does video, and he really researches. He goes to the archives, and he goes to Germany, he goes to England, and he finds out everything. And what the question is, if the Germans had the best, you can't argue that they didn't have the best. They had the best machine guns. There was a machine gun the Americans called the Ripsaw, I think it was called. They had the biggest tanks, the biggest cannons. That 88 was very famous, anti-aircraft gun. They put it on tanks also. The half tracks. They had the best equipment, and why did they lose the war? Primarily it's because the leadership. Hitler was a corporal in the First World War. He didn't do nothing. He didn't know anything about tactics. He fought with emotions. He fought with, we should do this, and to the last man. And you don't conduct a war like that. You don't tell your generals you fight until you die. You need to give them room to maneuver. That's what he did to Rommel in the desert war in Libya and Algeria, Northern Africa. Told him to fight until the death. Rommel needed to retreat. He needed fuel. He wasn't getting it. And they lost the North African campaign. Himmler was in charge of the SS. It was supposed to be like the top of the line, top-notch army. Himmler didn't have any, he had no battle experience. He didn't study tactics and maneuvers and logistics and nothing like that. And he was conducting these maneuvers on his own. And Himmler was a chicken farmer. He was a chicken farmer. What does he know about being a general? And the real generals, they would basically told, shut up and just listen. We're going to do it like this. We're going to do it like that. And that's why they lost the war, because they did a lot of stupid mistakes. Another stupid mistake is you don't declare war on one country and then on the other. He declared war to Russia after he took half of Europe, and then he declared war to the United States. It went to his head because he defeated France, but the French didn't have all that heavy equipment either. And I understand that the Germans also were kind of doubting that they could win the war because they only had 10 or 15% armor. Everything else was on foot or on horses. They had a lot of horses. That they were using it to move the troops behind the tanks. They didn't show that. The same way that the Japanese didn't have a lot of troop carriers, they had bicycles. And in the Philippines, they went in by bicycle and they took the English by surprise and kicked their ass. France, they thought they had the Maginot Line. With that, they were going to take care of business. And all the Germans did was go around it. You don't fight standing still. You gotta be able to maneuver and move around. The Maginot Line practically wasn't used. Those cannons were just sitting there. One of the best generals America had was Patton, and he said it. He said the worst thing you can do is hunker down and defend from a fixed position. You gotta be able to maneuver. You gotta be able to move. And do it fast. And Patton knew that. He understood it. It's not the old days that you can sit in a castle and shooting arrows and cannons or whatever back and forth from a castle. Even the people in the castle, sooner or later they lost because they got surrounded. There was no food coming in, and they had to surrender. Sooner or later, you have to surrender in a fixed position. You gotta be able to do flanking maneuvers. And then Hitler also made a mistake, a lot of mistakes, sending the troops, I think it was in September, thinking that he was gonna take Russia in a month or two. And then the winter came, and in Russia in the winter is the worst place you wanna be, especially for vehicles. All the ground becomes like meringue, it's like really soft mud. The trucks and the jeeps and the tanks, everything was getting stuck. They didn't have the right type of clothing either. They were freezing. The Russians had the right type, very, very snuggly They were like in a sleeping bag. But the Germans have those long coats, but they're not made for winter. Russia goes below zero, easy. You're looking at 30, 40, below zero. So they made a lot of mistakes. And that's the reason they lost. No matter if you got good equipment and if you're armed to the teeth, you think you're going to win because somebody with bad equipment or not as good equipment or not as plenty can do some maneuvers and outflank you and defeat you. I mean, look what happened to the Russians in Afghanistan. They got defeated by a bunch of uh, tribal people fighting in sandals. They didn't even have boots. They had sandals. That's impressive, and they fought hard. Those guys are hard fighters, and it's been known in history. Even I think Alexander the Great made a comment that they feared the Afghans because they got sworn by them, I guess. I have to dig into Alexander a little bit, but what happened in Second World War, it was ridiculous. I mean, you look at the equipment, huge cannons that they had at the coast there, protecting. They call it the Atlantic Wall, I think it was. Um, and they lost the war. Having the best equipment, the best tanks, really well trained army. I mean, you see those guys marching, and man, they look like robots. And by the way, they also were on drugs. They were using, I understand they were using some type of methamphetamine that they were giving the troops, and they could fight for days even. I mean, they had everything, you know, and still they lost the war. The United States only landed 150,000 troops. They had 15 divisions sitting in Calais. A division is about what? 12,000, I think it is, 12 to 15. So they had over 150,000 men sitting in Calais while they were landing over here in Normandy, and Hitler didn't want to release the tanks because he thought that was only a ruse, that it's a fake invasion, the main invasion is going to come through. Another mistake. I mean, one mistake. It's all about leadership. It's not about the best equipped army. It's about the leading the army in the right way. So you can have some top of the line army and still lose the war. And there were some generals on the American side also that they were goof ups. The guy that, I don't remember his name, but the guy that was in charge of the invasion down in Italy, that was a joke. So that movie Anzio, there was nobody there. They landed in Anzio and they thought that the military, the Germans were just 5 miles away or something like that, and they didn't advance quick enough. They didn't take advantage of the null in the battle. There was no battle. And Winston Churchill in a speech, he said, "I thought we unleashed the tiger and we ended up with a beach whale because nothing was moving." The guy just was very uh, uncertain of everything. He wasn't a go-getter like Patton. Patton would have run over everybody. He would just, let's make sure there's somebody that didn't have a little plane to go scouting. They sent out a jeep and the guy drove all the way to Rome and then say, "Hey, there's nobody in the way." And then by the time they got the jet together, the Germans noticed that they had a landing there, and they started bringing out the troops, and then the fighting began. So they lost that opportunity. So there were American. There were some American generals also. They did some big fuck ups. Another big fucker was the British General Montgomery. He got lucky in Northern Africa because Rommel had no supplies. He had no fuel, and they couldn't keep up with they brought the Americans were bringing, or the British were bringing, a lot of tanks, American tanks, to Montgomery, and the Americans had better intelligence than the British. In fact, there was a report that the British didn't have almost no intelligence, and they were just doing things, you know, their way. And since Rambo didn't have the supplies he needed and the fuel he needed, it didn't receive any more tanks because they were getting shelled on the way there from Malta. Montgomery won the battle. But if Rommel had the amount of equipment that he wanted, and he kept requesting, he wasn't getting anything. Or whatever he was getting, it was being sunk in the Mediterranean. Montgomery won the battle, and he got lucky there. But when they did that market garden operation in Northern Europe to take those bridges up in the Low Countries, that was another fuck up. If you see that movie, A Bridge Too Far, that shows you what happened there. It was a complete mess, and Montgomery planned it, and then they said it was a success. Bullshit. But I'm still amazed. I am still amazed that the Germans were so advanced. They came out with the rockets. They came out with the jet plane. They came out with the best. Even the design of the helmet, everybody admired it. Everybody said, that's the right type of helmet. The British had the little half cap thing. The American had a bowl. It's like a salad bowl. But the Germans had the right angle to cover and it will cover the back of the neck. It was a very well designed helmet. That the Americans have something similar now, in the Kevlar material. It's not steel. I don't think there's any steel there. But the Germans had the best equipment. It's amazing that with that, they didn't have enough of it. Some of the problem they had. They ran out of steel. They even built, I don't know if people know this, they even built an aircraft carrier. But they ran out of material because when they lost Norway, that's where the steel was, the steel ore. They didn't have enough material to finish the aircraft carrier, and they just left it on the side of a river. So after the war, the Russians found the aircraft carrier half finished inside of that river, and instead of taking it home and finish it and having one of the newest aircraft carrier and learn how to use it and all that, no, they towed it out to sea, and they practiced bombarding it and launching torpedoes from airplanes and stuff, and they sunk it. Idiots. I don't know how big the aircraft carrier was, but that's a big ship. They should have saved it and finished it, but they didn't. They just destroyed it. Yeah. So it's not about the quality, more or less, it's more about the quantity. The Russians built a bunch of those T-34s, and they just swarmed. They had hundreds of those tanks, and they swarmed the Germans from every direction. Now, one thing about the Russians, that they didn't have a very accurate way of aiming. They would just aim looking down the tube of the cannon, and then put the round in there and shoot it. It's a very primitive tank. One thing it had going for it is that it was speedy, and it had an angle body, so the rounds will ricochet off and not really do any big damage. They will get pretty slammed when the Tigers got a hold of them, but there were so many, and the Tiger was slow. Tiger, I think, was doing 25, 28 miles an hour. The T-34 was doing 35, 38, something like that, miles an hour. And by the way, the engine was an American engine that they bought from a tractor company before the war, and they copied it. They produced a bunch of it, and they installed it in those tanks, and that's what they had. But they didn't really have quality. They had quantity. Same thing with the Sherman. The Sherman wasn't really up to par with the Tiger or the other German tanks, but they had a lot of them, and they would go around the back and hit him in the back, and then they will blow up. When you build the machine, there's always a weak spot. It's not going to be solid armor all the way around. There's going to be an area that's going to be weaker, and that's when the Americans were hitting it in the back with the engine and back there. So, but I am very impressed with the technology that the Germans had, that they were very advanced. I mean, those jet engines, those rockets, they just didn't have enough of it. I mean, American planes, like the Mustang would do 400, 450 miles an hour, about there. Not exactly. And then the 92, what was it? The 262 or the 626, something like that, jet plane, double engine. That thing would do over 600 miles an hour and just go and just pass them. If Germany would have waited 2 years, given plenty of time, 2 years to build up more modern equipment, they would have won. I think they would have won the war, because they didn't have an aiming system for the rockets either. It was just designed to hit big cities. They didn't have the ability to aim a port, let's say, when they were disembarking all those troops and tanks and everything to invade Normandy. They would have hit that area and destroyed it. That would have delayed the invasion. They didn't hit the beaches where they were landing because they didn't have a way to aim with those rockets. They didn't have enough of the rockets. And what happened after the war, most of those German scientists went to work for the Americans. And the ones that were captured by the Russians, they were working for the Russians, by force, really, because they were prisoners. That's why they were able to go and put a satellite in space and then start launching rockets and doing all kinds of stuff. Because German technology, it wasn't Russian technology. So the question is, where did they get this advanced technology that they were ahead years from propeller planes? They had really good submarines at the later date. At the beginning, they had so-so submarines, but they have better submarines with a big snorkel that they can travel and suck the air. They didn't have to surface to be seen and bring in oxygen or anything. They needed more time to develop the technology and the weaponry to make it more advanced than anybody else. But they made a lot of mistakes. I mean, you don't send a battleship out to the ocean like the Bismarck or the other one, the sister ship, I forget the name. You don't send those out to the middle Atlantic by themselves. There were no escort ships, there were no aircraft carriers, there were no cruisers, there were no even destroyers. They just thought that one big ship would be impressive enough, and yeah, they would aim better than the Americans, and they would hit. They were pretty accurate. When one ship gets surrounded by 5, you're not gonna come out of that too well. Same thing that happened down in the South Atlantic when they were sinking ships down southern Africa, and they were traveling around the between Argentina, and they sent down 3 ships, I think they were, and they shot the what is it, Mark Spey, or it was a pocket battleship, and I don't know what they call it, a pocket. That thing was pretty big, and they damaged it enough that they had to go to Montevideo and anchor there for repairs. So they just didn't do things right. You just don't send, no matter how big the ship or how powerful, you don't send the ship out on its own. You need to have some help, and with radar, that also they had. They started getting radar towards the end, but they didn't have the radar system that the British had. So they can have a ship, let's say, 10 miles away from the main battleship, and that ship would scan the ocean and say, hey, there's a fleet coming this way, and they can pick it up a lot further than the main ship. Things like that. So they were very smart, but not that smart. What do you think, Baba? He's kicking back here with me. This is a pick-me-up. Little caffeine. I've been doing some things around here. And then I got a little, after you have lunch, you get a little sleepy. So I had some of that picked me up. Mainly what Hitler needed, and I don't agree with Hitler in any way, but I'm looking at it from a tactical perspective. If you're going to do that, one of the main things you need is fuel and the raw materials. They didn't have enough of either. They ran out of fuel when they went to the Battle of the Bulge, I think there was, that they had to walk away from the tanks. When you see that movie, it's incredible. They had those big, powerful tanks, and they had no fuel. So if you're gonna prepare for something, you gotta be prepared for something, and you have to have plenty of everything. They didn't have everything. They were advanced also in automotive technology. I mean, and the roads that they made. I mean, when Eisenhower went to visit Germany after the war, and he saw those roads, he's going like, whoa. Say, we need that in America. We had a bunch of dirt roads over here. Very little main highways like that. And that's when he implemented, I think it was him, he implemented the road work project for this country. Making roads, highways, freeways, things like that. Because they copied it from the Germans. So the Germans had great ideas for just about everything. And you have to also, I mean, when he took over almost all of Europe, because southern France, he didn't bother with it, because he said to the French, okay, I'll give you that piece and you control that. He should have said, okay, I'm going to settle down now and just keep what I have. But he wanted more, and then he wanted England. And at the beginning, he didn't really want to invade England because the English are the same people. I don't know if you know that. That's why they're called Anglo-Saxon. The Anglos are the English, Saxons are the Germans. I mean, the royal family in England, they're all Germans. King, what was his name? That he married this American, and he went to Germany to talk to Hitler, said he was trying to talk peace talks. No, he was very sympathetic to the Nazi party. And the Queen said, no, you're out of here. And they basically shipped him off to the Bahamas. And he stayed there like after 9 years after the war. And he wanted to participate in government and stuff, and they said no. They kind of kept it quiet because it was embarrassing. He spoke fluent German. His grandmother was German. Everybody in that family, German ancestry. Let's put it that way. And if Hitler would have said, okay, I'm going to keep the Eastern Bloc down to Romania, that it has the oil deposits and that area down there by Greece. It was one of those countries that was loaded with oil, loaded. And he tried to take it, but he just opened up a huge front, and he said, okay, an army go to the north, an army go to the south, an army go that way, and then turn around and come this way. And it was all done by emotions. He wanted to take Leningrad to teach him a lesson. There's nothing in Leningrad that was worthwhile. And they lost a whole army there. I think it was the 9th Army. It was a bunch of fuck ups. I mean, the Germans had over 4 million men army, huge, bigger than any country, uh, and they lost just about everybody. Then the country went into shit because now, day and age, they don't have a big enough population to cover what they used to have in men population. Men are the one that produces things, work, um, for construction projects and things like that. And that's why they're taking in immigrants from the Middle Eastern country because they need men. They need manpower. They lost a lot of people because of all those mistakes they made. You know, you declare war to Russia, first of all. If you would have gone into the region of, I think it was Georgia, which it's the food basket, and say, okay, I'm going to keep this. And then Lenin would have said, okay, as long as you don't come any further, he probably would have let it go. But he kept pushing and pushing. He wanted to go away to Moscow. He wanted to take everything. And then the winter said, no, you're not. Winter Russians are famous for being brutal. Look what happened to Napoleon. He got greedy. And that's another thing that bugs me. These people don't study history. From Europe, they should know the history from their own continent and say, what happened to Napoleon? Oh, I'm not going to make that mistake. But he did exactly the same. Well, these electric cars are quiet, but those tires are loud. Every time they come by, you know, it's noisy. So that's what happens, that it doesn't matter the advance in your technology. If you're stupid and emotional, just don't make an emotional decision because you want to teach somebody a lesson. Or they were saying that the Russians were inferior because they had no toilets. It's ridiculous. Most of them had no toilets, yeah, and most of them were illiterate, yeah, but there were a lot of them. And I saw a documentary that the Russians were saying we didn't have any more ammo and we just ramming them, and they were drunk. They were drunk on vodka. They said, "The hell, I'm gonna get killed, but I'm gonna take a few with me," and they would just ram the tanks against the other ones, against the Germans, because they were running out of ammo, or they were drunk. That's why the generals that knew their shit said, hey, we gotta get rid of this dude. He's screwing it up. And then the other fuck up was the rounding up everybody, rounding up the Jews, the Gypsies, the midgets, people that he said they were inferior. Put them in camps, work them to death. They didn't round them up to put them in furnaces. He rounded them up for free labor, to work on making powder, to make war machines, and to do things, factories and everything, building those, making the ammo and everything. And then when they were being underfed, and then when they were so weak and stuff that they died, that's when they put them in the furnace. So they were cremating, basically, the people. And then he still went and gassed a bunch of people also. It's not going to solve anything doing that. You don't get rid of a population. If you don't want them in your country, kick them out. They want to keep their race pure. They don't want intermixing. Because when you're mixing something with something else, it's not what it was before. So let's say you got a glass of milk and you add mint, and you add chocolate, and you add cumin or turmeric. It's not milk anymore. When you taste it, it tastes like crap, right? Well, they want to keep their milk pure. So if it's German, you want to have the population of German be higher than and same thing here, same thing in other countries. Spain has a policy that let's say you marry a Spanish woman and you have a kid. Well, that kid is not considered Spanish, because to be considered Spanish, both persons have to be Spanish, and their parents and their grandparents and all the way back have to be Spanish, to keep the Spanish blood pure, or Spanish. I don't mean pure as saint, glorious or anything. To keep the country Spanish. England has a lot of people from different parts of, like from India and stuff like that. The girl was saying, no, because my parents came here from India and now they're English. And he said, and the priest said, but if it's 90% Indian, then it's not England anymore. It's India in another place. So it's the same thing. Everybody wants to keep their country of origin to be the country of origin. And if you have migration coming in from other countries, yeah, they can come in and live there and work as long as you're peaceful, you don't make any trouble. Why is it a why do they gonna allow to have people come in and destroy your country because they're envious or they want to take it over? And that's what's going to happen in Europe. There's a big problem over there. That's why the vice president now said in this reunion they have with the countries in Germany, and he told all the generals, he says, I'm not worried about China, I'm not worried about Russia, I'm worried about the inside enemy that you have here, because they're Muslims and they don't like the Catholic religion. They want to change it. They want everybody to be a Muslim, and they're causing trouble. They're knocking down crosses and they storming churches and they're doing things. So those guys, you have to deport. Listen to that thing. Man, they're all electric cars and they're all noisy as hell. See, that's a gas car. You can hardly hear the tires. You get an electric one? Like that one. Listen to the tires. They're loud. They're noisy. So that's one of the reasons that also Hitler wanted to have Germany for Germans. He didn't want nobody else. And like I said, if you wanted to deport them, you could deport them. Just don't have to kill them. Let them go to wherever they're from. Then if you were born there, let's say you're Jewish, and you were born there from, your generations going back 100, 150 years. Aren't you German? Just because you also have a second language and you have a different religion. But the situation there was different because of what happened after the First World War. That the Jews that were in charge of the banks, and they call it the money lenders back then. And this has been going on for more than 300 years. They would start taking over everything. And then the Germans started getting envious. Well, look at this, people have a beautiful house, and these people have beautiful Mercedes, and the people have better cars and jewelry and everything. When they lost the war in the First World War, the banks started repossessing everybody's properties, ranches, farms, because they couldn't pay because of the depression. Depression hit everybody very hard, including here. And the only people that were on top of it, they were floating above it, were the people with a lot of money. And in Germany, it was mostly the Jews that owned their furniture stores. And one thing about the Jews you gotta say is that they are business people. They are business people, and they're good at it. They know how to make money. They could be into any type of trade. It could be jewelry. It could be furnishings, furnitures. It could be fabricating whatever. They know how to make money. But then the banks took advantage of the depression and started repoing. And so a lot of people were losing everything, going hungry. And Hitler saw that when he was a corporal. He saw that. And that ticked him off big time. And then when he got into power in 1933, he says, now I'm going to get even. And that's the reason they started going after the Jews, and they started going after everybody that wasn't pure Aryan, which I don't think that's a thing. I mean, they've been mixed with different, they got Danish and they got Swiss, and you name it. Europe is not The Germans were completely Aryans. And by the way, Aryans is not even from Germany; it's further east. But anyways, the thing is that he wanted to make Germany for Germans only, and they were instead of kicking him out, they said, okay, kick him out, you know, but you don't have to go nuts and start destroying everything and everybody. And that's an emotion. He did it out of emotion, not out of logic. He should have said, okay, kick out the people that not worth anything, and I'm going to keep the smart people. I'm going to keep the people that can maintain the businesses, make the country better, uh, have the country go forward, no matter who they are or what they believe. Religion is a private thing. It shouldn't be even going into the politics, because religion is a belief. It's another page. It's another chapter somewhere. Everything happens for a reason, and that was the reason he went berserk, attacking, you know, and he wanted more land and more land and more land. He saw what Russia had and said, "Hey, they're not using it." If you look at history and you look at the reasons why countries take over regions and treat people the way they treat them, is because those people are not exactly advancing. They're stuck in the past. They're stuck 200-300 years in the past, and they haven't progressed. They haven't invented anything. They're still primitive, and they come in and say, "Hey, you know, all these people have this huge piece of land, and they're not doing anything with it. We can do better. I'm taking it." The same thing happened here with the Indians. The cattle barons, they saw the big grazing lands in the plains, and they say, "Hey, we can bring here a bunch of cattle, and we can have this, huge empire." And the Indians are just sitting around, just hunting deer, and it's basically starving, not having enough of anything, and they live in portable dwellings. They haven't built a city. They haven't built an empire. They've been here for centuries. And they said, okay, we need to put these people in a reservation, and then we can take over the rest of the land. That's what happened here. And Hitler wanted to do the same thing. Well, that's enough of history for now. And that's not my opinion. That is what's happened in the world, which is not fair. It's happened everywhere. Yeah, everybody did it. All right, guys, I'll let you go. I'll see you on the next one.